Hello everyone and welcome to this evening's meeting. I think I'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies submitted from Councillor Amos, Vice Chairman, who submitted Councillor Sue Honeywood as his substitute. We've got apologies from Councillor Goldman, who has submitted Councillor Doyle as his substitute. Apologies from Councillor Harris with no substitute appointed. We've got apologies from Councillor Baker, and for the record, we've got Lisa Hastings joining us online on Teams.
Okay, thank you for that. Firstly, I'm sure the committee will join me in wishing Chris Amos all the best as he's recovering from an operation that he had just before Christmas. Obviously, I'd like to welcome Mike, Carrie and Sue to this evening's meeting and kindly offering to substitute, and also welcome Mark as the leader and the officer team for being here this evening. So I'd like to move to the next item, which is minutes of the last meeting. Are we all happy with those? Have a proposer? Thanks, Graham. And a seconder? Mike? Can Mike do it if he wasn't here?
You can.
Yep, okay, yep, that's fine. Thanks, Mike.
Chairman, before moving on to the next item, it's probably worth recording here that the minutes do reference a proposed conversation at that stage between the Section 151 officer and Councillor Steady, and as a consequence of that conversation, a flowchart in relation to release or use of funds was developed and has been circulated this evening and will be considered as part of item 8 on your agenda, and in addition an email exchange between yourself and the leader of the council in respect of spendals dating back to 2024 and 25. That is also set out and has been circulated into the public domain for conversation during item 8 as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So moving on to the next item, item 3 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any? Okay, if anything comes up and you think you need to declare an interest during the meeting, please let me know. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
We've received no such questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next we have item 5, which I thought it would be helpful if we took 5 and 6 together. I was hoping that Councillor Baker and Councillor Casey would be here for this, but obviously they're not. So I don't know if Mark?
Chairman, thank you. Councillor Baker is exceptionally ill. It was under my advice that he doesn't turn up, but I'm happy to answer questions on his behalf tonight as best I can. I'm pretty sure the committee would not want what he currently has.
Thank you for that.
Chairman, it's probably just for the record, it'd be helpful if the final report of the Housing Strategy and Development Task and Finish Working Group from December 2025 was just formally received. The issues that are set out in it can be addressed as part of, as I think you're suggesting, as part of item 6, and as you consider that, you can look at the recommendations from the Task and Finish Group at that stage. If it could be just simply received at this stage, it would be helpful though, Chairman.
Yes, I'm happy to do that, and I'm sure the committee will join me in wishing Andy a speedy recovery. So we've now received those items. So under the housing part, we'll move to the questions that we've arranged, and obviously we've got written responses to. Now, those questions and the responses will be published on the website. But in order to move things along a little bit, we thought rather than go through each question by reading it out and then there's response, that I would go through each question in turn. If you have a supplementary on any of those questions, could you please just give a brief explanation for anyone listening in of what the question's about and then your supplementary? So with that, I'll move to the list, which I have. And the first question came from Councillor Steady. Do you wish to follow up on the written response?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments to make. Firstly, the 30 new council homes in the pipeline for 2025, is that right? Should that be 2026? And that's on page 51 of in the agenda.
So we're going to run into the problems that me not being a portfolio holder would be. That's the technical detail. So I'm going to pass that to one of the officers.
Yes, apologies. It should be 2026.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. So just a supplementary on that then. How does that compare with previous periods? For instance, we've got 30 new. So in those we've got what 49 new sites. How does that compare to previous years?
So in previous years, it's become a mixture of properties that have been gifted, purchased, or built, basically. And the numbers running from 2020, which is when we had the first housing, the Brainscott housing strategy came to being to the end of that administration. We were gifted, built, and acquired 61 properties. And since July 23 to January 26, strange enough, it's 61 properties that are a mixture of gifted, built, and bought. So it's broadly similar to what we're used to.
Yeah.
Are you happy with that? Would you like to move to your second question?
Yeah, concerning the alignment of strategies of the councils, which could be in the unitary. I'm just a bit concerned that where is the converging of policies going to come in as much that obviously there could be a decision. We're very strong with our housing, aren't we? But I think what Colchester's got a standalone arm's length, and then I don't think Braintree have got any. So is there going to be a problem? Because the decision could be that the new unitary will sell it off, or sell them off, or sell some off.
I'll have a little stab of it. Officer, correct me if I'm wrong. So you're talking about LGR here and how it all comes together, just for the people that are listening. So obviously we've got our own housing stock. You're right. Colchester has what's an ALMO, which is an arm's length company, as you said, and Braintree doesn't have its own. And bringing those three together is not going to be something that's going to be done overnight or anytime soon. So we've got different strategies. You see, and them coming out at the moment. And you're saying, how are we aligning them? Well, we can't, because they're different things. So you can't align a housing strategy for Braintree because it operates completely different to how we do. What does happen is that we need to stop the perception that in 2028 everything stops. We put all those strategies down, we pick up new ones. So these strategies will continue to work as they are now, and then the new combined authority will come to a decision on how it wants to bring the ALMO together to form its strategy around its housing. Is my best guess, but I'm happy to take any. Might have it wrong.
Well, there is a step back from that, because your question presupposes that the actual alignment will be with Colchester and Braintree. But until the Minister makes that decision, we don't know that. So one of the proposals which has been submitted and is out for consultation would be with us, not with Braintree, but with Malden. So we can't actually start doing that work with authorities, which we don't know what the minister's decision is going to be. That decision will be taken in March by the minister. Well, we're expecting the decision in March by the minister. Your question around housing is a very good one, but actually it crosses the myriad of services which this council and councils um, operate and have statutory responsibility for. So if you look at the services, every single service is going to have to go through what is it we're going to align. Most services are going to have differences in the way they're run. Some quite big differences, some such as the housing where there's 3 different designs if it was Braintree and Colchester. Some services much more similar. If I can give you another example, the waste contract. Waste is in-house by Colchester, we're external. So again, it will take time for those services to be harmonised and the way in which it's done. So it's a very good question. The actual work has started by a series of groups. I'm leading on one, and different chief execs are leading on one, on different groups, to look at how we prepare first for what it's called the Minded To decision by the minister, and then as we go down the line for the vesting day. It is worth knowing, though, that even on the 1st of April 2028, it is unlikely that all the services will be aligned and done. Because when you think about it, new councillors will be elected in 2027. They'll only be in shadow form. They have absolutely the right, and their decision making shouldn't be what's called fettered by the fact that they can decide once the council is operating how they want that council to operate. So post 2028, a number of these things will continue in the format, and post 2028, there will be decisions made by the new authority to decide how they want to deliver. And of course, with the priorities of the new council, some may be they want the Rolls-Royce of certain services and the Mini of other services. Also, of course, their finances will play a part. And when I say that, of course, is the new authority, whatever it might be, and however there may be across Essex, each authority will have adult social care, send children's services. So all those will put pressure upon those costs. So the Mini or the Rolls-Royce service will be a decision for the new authority and obviously the new members on that authority. So the question is a good one in terms of it's a lot of work going into it, but we don't even know what the configuration of the new unitaries are. And that as we only be a minded to decision in March of this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any follow-up? No. Does anyone else on either of Graham's questions have any comments or something they would like to make? No? Okay. The next question was from myself, and it was around Colchester Council's housing stock. The fact it operates as an arm's length company. I've got no follow-up to that one. Does anyone else have any comments on that one? No. The next question is from Peter Harris, who's unfortunately unable to attend this evening, but Mike Bush is substituting. So I don't know, Mike, have you any comments on that one, please?
Yeah, it really is a supplement. Well, just obviously I've seen the responses this evening, and it's all sort of hinging on the Cabinet report for 30th of January, which I'll be looking forward to read, because there are lots of questions to be asked there. And when I see that report, then I think, Chairman, maybe at the next meeting we have, we'll have far more to talk about. That's what I assume, having read through the reports once we've had them. We need to probably raise questions that need to be answered and responded to. So that's what I can say on that at Spendles, this one particularly, about homelessness.
Does anyone wish to respond?
I missed the question. There's going to be some questions. Can we bring it back to the next meeting, wasn't it? Sorry, Mike.
It wasn't really a question. It was saying just responding that you've actually going to produce a report on the 30th of the Cabinet meeting. And once we've had that, then there will be questions raised from that, no doubt. Okay.
Yeah, so there is a report in the pipeline. It's going to be published on the 22nd. And that will go to Cabinet on the 30th.
Okay.
And we'll be discussing it on Friday.
Thank you. That's why I said respond rather than answer. Does anyone else have any follow-up on that? Okay. The next question comes from myself, and the question I drafted was slightly different to the question that's recorded. So if I read out the question that I drafted, you see the difference isn't much, but there's a little bit there, and rather than you try and check across, I'll explain. It says, what impacts locally are anticipated as a result of the Renters Reform Act? Please cover the supply of rental accommodation, levels of homeless, and the effect on the homelessness service of the council. So the piece that's slightly different is the end, the service of the council. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, so I'll answer the question. It's very similar to the one that's here. It is too soon to say. I mean, the Renters Act doesn't come in until April 2026, but it's not that we haven't thought about it. And it's just a crystal ball. You know, we can have an anticipation. For instance, we could, you know, some people might say that 15 to 30% of the market's going to disappear over a certain period of time, but then other people are saying that those houses will be bought by other private investors, making more larger groups of housing and things like that. So what you're talking about is whether the supply of rental accommodation will go up or down. You know, we can't guess that. I think one of the things that we should be aware of is the impact on us. Now, we're quite unique, very unique, in fact, that around 80% of our housing population is privately owned, and only about 19% of it is privately rented. So with such a small rental, the impact of these changes are less severe to us than, say, somewhere that has 50% or 60% private rented. So it's on our radar. Crystal ball, we have no idea how this is going to play out, but we do know that things will change, but in which direction they'll go, nobody can tell you that at the moment. There is a feeling in two directions, so it's just one of those things. Sorry, I can't be more specific.
That's fair. That's fair enough. As I say, it is a little bit of a leap into the unknown. I'm sort of fully aware of that, and that's why I was concerned about services of the council. So just to follow up and quickly finish that, would you be happy for this, for the monitoring of the council's housing services in this area, for a quarterly update to be sent to this committee?
I think, and I'm going to go back to the other, the Task for Finish group, that's been asked in there. I'm acutely aware of the capacity of the organisation, our organisation. A quarterly report seems a little bit too often for me, and I would probably push against quarterly reports. You can ask and we can see what your recommendation might be.
Okay, thank you. All from me on that item. The next one is Joe. Do you have a follow-up at all?
Thank you. No, I'm quite happy with the response that I got back from that. Obviously, you know, we were talking about, or some of the councillors that are informal were talking about how the renting market, how it was going to affect the portfolio holders who own massive properties, and my concern was more for the actual tenants, because they need protection, but I'm happy with the answer I've received. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that. Rather than me ask each time after a question, is there anyone else? If you do want to jump in, just indicate, and then obviously I'm sure the people here will be happy to answer your questions. So the next one is Councillor Steady. Over to you, Graham.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's basically concerning a national policy of fewer hotels to accommodate refugees, and obviously the answer is we've got no such hotels in tendering. So it fits in with your answer to my first question, where we're shifting away from from hotels and bed and breakfast, so we're bringing on more of our own stock. So I'm quite happy with that, but this will probably fit in with my next question, which I'll come to in a little while.
Okay, thanks for that. Oh, sorry. Moving to the next question, which was from myself. Again, my question was slightly different to this, but only slightly, and I think you've answered, but I will clarify. In my question, I said, could you provide the figures on placements by other councils into rental accommodation in tendering for the period 1st of January 2025 to 31st of December 2025? Now, I think you've answered that because it says the year, but I just thought I'd confirm.
I almost had that one, Chairman, until you threw the dates in, so I'm going to pass that one to officers if they don't mind.
Thank you. Yeah, so the year is correct in that 12 months. And I've got a breakdown of other LAs that have placed people within tendering. So if you're happy, I'll just read through the list and numbers. Yes. Yeah, sure. So we had 2 placements from Barking and Dagenham. We had 1 from Braintree, 3 from Redbridge, 1 from Thurrock, 12 from Chelmsford, and the big number is Colchester at 51.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I've got no further questions on that item. Okay, the next one then is back to Graham.
Yeah, so the 2 questions I've asked is one about obviously new council housing, so that's one strand. And then the other strand is the hotels to house homelessness people in and also refugees. And now, and I have brought this up before, so I'm just wondering, I've given an example there of using properties, commercial properties, to bring in houses in multiple occupancy. So, for instance, the one I've cited before is the M&S building, which we own, which has already got the water and the electric laid on, and about putting glamping pods in there, because homelessness and what people need if they're without a home, and they want to get back to work, then they need an address if they're going to go for any sort of job, and also to get a bank account, get back on the right path. They need an address for the banks. So the idea is, this is from an example, the Macquarie Foundation, which is in Stoke-on-Trent, who was it's ex-footballer Lou Macquarie, you might have heard of him, and he's done exactly that. So he's bought a warehouse and he's fitted it all out with glamping pods, and that's really helped a lot of people. And so with homelessness, I just worry, how are we going to solve the problem? If the homelessness is going to become more and more, how are we going to solve the problem? I know we're bringing on more council houses, I get that, and it's going to cut down on any hotels and bed and breakfast, but I can't see how we're actually going to get ahead of the curve. And I think this could be an ideal opportunity to do something a little bit different, because I think we've probably built housing over the years, haven't we, as Damien said. And is it? I think it's the definition of insanity if we're doing the same things all the time and we're expecting different results. So what we're doing, we're building new homes, which we've done before. We're taking people out of bed and breakfast, which we've done before. But are we actually going to get ahead of the curve?
Thank you, Graham. I applaud your aspirational thinking, and that's exactly what we've been doing on the working group. So when it comes to thinking how are we going to start, you've got 2 things. You've got prevention and you've got the actual homeless component of that. So you've seen us already do something with Spendles. We don't have a single family in any hotel, bed and breakfast, everything is now in a council property. That's an address, that's got staff there, they're supported, and average turnaround of one of those families is 66 days into either a private rented property or somewhere else where they prefer to live. So that's already a success, but we do have a cohort of single people, and we're looking at that. Now, your suggestion around what the Marconi Foundation is, in my opinion, we're just dealing with the symptoms of a problem that the entire country is facing. I think one of the things that we're looking at now, harder within the working group, and there's a report coming, is the prevention side of things. So how do we keep people in the homes there are? There are enough homes, in my opinion, and it seems that if you look at our housing building stats versus our increase in population, we are building more houses than we are getting population. So it feels like we are generally, maybe very slowly, heading in the right direction to solving that problem. But it is also the problem that we have is, as I mentioned earlier, 80% of our housing is privately owned. It's only a small percentage that are rented. That may be solved when we get into LGR territory. There are much more open scopes to us. We're going to be exploring, you know, Braintree's areas, Colchester's areas. They're going to be looking at us. So there's going to be a whole unitary approach to homelessness, and I'm hoping that will produce some results. I think there's a considerable amount of energy going into the prevention side of things now. So we've actually took on, and I can't remember the exact title, so I apologise, but a homeless prevention officer recently. Yeah, so the idea is that person will, when they receive the approach, will help that person stay where they are. So if they might say, for instance, be in mortgage arrears, it's cheaper for the council to sit there and say, do you know what, we'll pay mortgage arrears and keep you in a house than it would be to put them in private accommodation, which costs more than their mortgage arrears in 6 days. So it's that kind of approach. And there's also some people find it, they might live have family somewhere else in the country. So we might be able to help move them to somewhere where they're supported. And that's the idea of homeless prevention. And I think there's a general misconception out there around the entire area that the council will give you a house. That's generally the way people feel. Get yourself on a housing list, you'll get a house. It's not the truth. And I think some of the organisations that people are going to are promoting that. And so some of the prevention work we're going to be doing is going to those organisations and say, you need to stop sending this message because it's not true. All we're going to be doing is putting them up in temporary accommodation while we find them somewhere to live, or they find themselves somewhere to live. I think that's the best I can do. I think I applaud your thinking. We've been looking for that kind of thinking. We have got some schemes in the pipeline. Got to wait for the 30th of January to give you an idea what those might be, or 22nd. I think I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Do you wish to?
You've passed the test.
Thank you very much.
I think that's the last question under the housing strategy part. So before we move to the next part, does anyone else have any questions they'd like to raise regarding housing strategy? No, one moment, please.
I just wanted to ensure that the committee has in its mind the recommendations from the Task and Finish group. And it may be that through you, Chairman, you will just want to ask the leader whether there's any comment on those recommendations at this stage. Obviously, if they are approved by this committee, they'll go off to Cabinet and there'll be a formalised response, but it may be that there's a comment that the leader wants to make in response to that.
Have you any comments you'd like to make on the working groups?
Thank you very much. I've actually read the recommendations in the report, so and I'm sure Councillor Baker will join me in thanking the Working Party for the work they've done. He turned up to every one of them, I believe, so lucky old him. So went through the recommendations, and barring that one small thing about how often the report comes in, I think Councillor Baker and I talked about that, and we're not quite convinced that a quarterly report is needed, and that probably a longer length of term will be where we probably push that one too, even half yearly or yearly to time with current reports that come to you. But the rest of the recommendations we absolutely had no problem with, and I think we'll be quite happy to approve them. That's if the committee are minded to send them to us.
Thanks for that. So I think the comments I made around the homelessness and the effect it's having on the council's services probably tie in with number 5 under the recommendations. And it sounds from what you're saying, we're both on the same sheet except for one thing, which is the timescale. Okay, that's fine. Does anyone else have any comments on this? No? Okay then. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say one very quick thing, and I just want to actually thank members for the work which they've done in that, as Councillor Baker and Councillor Stevens said. But also, I can't miss the opportunity of thanking our officers, because there's a huge amount of work that gone in this, and actually this is about the spatial future of housing for our district, linking in with obviously Gary Guyver and the work around the local plan as well. But the housing strategy is a huge piece of work, and so I just want to thank them for all the work that's gone in when they've got the myriad of other things around services which they're still dealing with whilst they've been putting together the housing strategy as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments before we move to the next part? So just to let people know what we've planned, we're going to look at the housing strategy and the quarterly one after the other, and then make our recommendations at the end, which means it'll be easier for the people who are visiting this committee today. They haven't got to sit around while we debate our findings or decisions. So with that, I'll move to the next part, which is financial performance update. And we have Richard with us this evening. Would you like to say a few words before we go to the questions? Or the leader, as I've been.
Let Mr. Barrett open.
So I think it's useful if we take those two items together, because we've got the quarterly position and then the financial forecast for both general financial trade, and they're part of the same story. So the item that was the quarterly update looks at the in-year position in terms of against the budget, and that then gets lifted into the forecast going forward if we need to. So I think if I sort of discuss in general terms, rather than take them individually, but just discuss in general terms the kind of process and context behind the development of the forecast, that'd be really, really handy and useful, I think, in terms of any questions following from that. I think interesting year this year for a number of reasons. I think the first one was around the waste contract, which was recognised in the quarterly report, where we used a sort of words around reaching a crossroads in terms of the cost of the waste service and that significant impact on the council's finances. So that was one element that was challenging. Along with LGR, clearly LGR has got a massive impact. Last year we'd extended the forecast now for 10 years. LGR come along and has completely shifted that time horizon, and also we've got the government's fair funding review and the settlement that's just come out as well. So there was a number of interesting elements in terms of the context of forecasting into 26, 27, and as we said, it's quite stark when you think between now and a unitary could be just two budgets left, and this is one of those, the 6-7 budget. So that was the context, and I think with the discussions we've had before around the underlying base budget, we've had a conversation before where inflationary pressures on expenditure outstrips the inflationary ability in terms of raising income. So there was this sort of mismatch. The reason I say that is that the underlying revenue budget cannot generate capacity to invest. It's kind of an underlying position that's stable, but it can't generate those sort of investments in priorities or other significant costs. So I think that was really, really important around the context of the waste service, because the waste service, we put extra funding in the waste service, and with a 2-year time horizon, it was a case of what one-off funding have we got that we can deploy over 2 years within that context. So what the budget is built on, it's around bringing all those elements together. So it's around looking at the savings, and we've never stopped looking at savings. There's always sort of efficiencies and other things we look at, looking at cost pressures, looking at the sort of like the general adjustments to the budget, inflationary bits and pieces, and bringing it all together. But rather than doing this annual annual exercise that set the financial sort of framework out for the next 2 years, which I think is a really, really useful position to take. So that's how the budget's been built. That's the context against how we look forward to 26, 27 and 27, 28. So when you look at the appendices, I mean, I'm talking about the general fund, in that sense, we'll talk about HRA in a mo. The appendices that we've got in front of us tonight in terms of the budget proposals is kind of telling that story. So it sets out the savings, it sets out cost pressures, and also, as we said at the start of this meeting, around the work around bringing those pots together, and that diagram that was introduced at the beginning in terms of looking at those monies been set aside, look at those pots that we've got, bring those together, and the proposal here is to bring that together into two basically funds, which is the corporate investment fund for revenue and corporate investment fund for capital. And along with the underlying forecast risk fund that underpins, that's not new for this year. That's been there right from when we sort of set out the 10-year plan back in 2017. That's sitting there as well. So it's really trying to balance all of those elements and give us a really good sustainable position going forward, and put us in a really good place for successor unitary council. And I think that's a really good sort of point as well to kind of highlight that we have got obligations to new unitary council, and not only is the right thing to do, but the government will make sure we do it anyway, and certainly on the obligations on statutory officers, we'd need to look at that as well. So I think this is, again, that's another angle to this as well. It's trying to meet the obligation as well, and that's a real balance as well, isn't it? Because you can't leave a new unitary council inheriting a position where it might have deficits but actually no cash in the bank. It's insolvent from day one. So I think there's that balance as well. So it's kind of double-edged in a way, because there's lots of elements to it, but we've got certainty as well, because the financial settlement that the government have announced just before Christmas is a three-year settlement, and we've been crying out for that for the last few years, where we normally have an annual position, and you're always waiting or reacting to an annual position. So there's some certainty as well, which is very, very useful and welcomed in terms of financial planning. So we know what our funding is going to be for the next 3 years. I know we spoke before about business rates, very, very complex area of the budget. That's all changed as well in terms of a reset. We're still working through the financial settlement detail, because the business rates and revenue support grant, there's things being rolled in, say moved from business rates and been rolled into revenue support grant. So we're working our way through that. The devil's always in the detail, so we're working through it at the moment to see what the impact is. And I think it's fair to say, we can have more conversations in a second, and any questions, is that it's a pretty cash neutral position in terms of the financial settlement. So we're not one of those ones winners, and we're not one of those ones that's losing. So again, expectations could be always nice to do better out of a financial settlement, but do you know what? If you don't do any worse, then that's not a bad place as well, because it adds to the certainty and stability of our forecasting period, which is now the 2 years, and then we're looking ahead just to that first year of the unitary council, so we can understand the position that we'll be leaving for that new unitary council and our obligations as well. So there's a lot of detail in the report, quite a lot of figures in the appendices. That's sort of a background and context, and the story behind where we've arrived at. And I said another report's going through the system, and that'll be the 22nd of January again, where the update would go to Cabinet on the 30th of January as well. So that's a general fund position. I'll stop at the general fund position if that's all right, and perhaps we'll go on to HRA in a second if that's okay with the committee.
If I may, just one very quick thing. Richard's absolutely right about the settlement. It looks like it's, roughly speaking, cost neutral. With the fairer funding settlement, I would say, and I'm going to say this as a whole, is we were slightly disappointed. And I say that for a very simple reason, is that it was predicated on servicing deprivation, and obviously we're highly deprived, so we will be writing to say about the levels of deprivation for tendering, and why some authorities have fared better with the fairer funding settlement by the look of it. We're still doing the work on it, but we are neutral, but actually we were hoping to see some further benefit from it because of being the fairer funding settlement and how it was built. So we will be following that up.
Richard, if the Section 151 officer can just introduce the flow chart that's there with reference to it, the fact that minute 24, there was a request for an investigation into ring fence funds. Councillor Steady, I think, met with you to undertake that, and this is the outcome of it. But perhaps if you can just talk about that to the committee before we go any further.
Yes, that's really, really good sort of way to present. Perhaps my style is in numbers on a spreadsheet, and it's one of the attachments in the report. So I think this is a much more sort of user-friendly way of doing it. So when we said around bringing those funding together and refocusing budgets, so we've set this, the context about the challenges we've got, and it's around sort of bringing that funding together. So what this is doing is on the left-hand side, it's looking at the revenue pots. What we've got down the left-hand side there is the money that's been previously set aside, and you can see there's a range of sort of budgets that have been sort of part of previous decisions. So rather than sort of leave them like that and deploy money or refocus it on an ad hoc basis, it's to bring all those together. It's take this opportunity. It's part of the 2-year plan, bring those together. So you can see on that left-hand side, there's various pots. Asset refurbishment reserve, benefits reserve, and going on down there, they've been contributed to a corporate investment fund. So as of the position that was reported to Cabinet in December, that would create a pot of funding of 2.854 million. And the same on the capital on the right-hand side. So we've got usable capital receipts and some historic contributions on DFGs. Again, that's a contribution that's brought that funding together into a corporate investment fund capital of 2.595. So that's the point there in those. In terms of the revenue, the same report that Cabinet considered in December also deployed some of that money as part of that report. So then it goes on to sort of say contributions from the corporate investment fund, and they've been used at this point, and it'll be subject to change when the final proposals go through the Cabinet in the end of January. But you can see that the cost pressures, and because we've got a 2-year plan, rather than fund the cost pressure in 6-7, this is now saying let's fund this over a 2-year time horizon. So I know we spoke about homelessness in the past, where we put additional funding into the budget on an annual basis. This is saying let's not do this annually, let's do it across the next 2 years. So I know in the appendices we've set aside at the moment, at the present time, £500,000, but that'd be £500,000 in 6-7 and £500,000 in 7-8 as well. So we're moving away from that annual thing. So that's why the figures there represent that 2-year commitment there, and then the balance, as it says there, balance subject to review as part of the next phases going forward. And on the right hand side, capital investment, there's the same report Cabinet had in December did not deploy any of that cash at that point, and it's actually subject to consideration at the moment. So that's still to be deployed as part of the next round of the budget cycle. And I'm sure going forward as well, because the intention is not to stop there. The intention is when we do the quarterly reporting as well, we can look at these pots, and money can be pushed into those pots and also come out of those pots as decisions are made during the year. So hopefully it neatens up the position and the financial sort of transparency. All adds to that sort of that commitment really that has been made before about transparent and open in terms of the funding. So hopefully that's a really, really good way of explaining the background and the pots that would be moved into those corporate investment funds. Hopefully that's helpful and easily accessible.
Thank you. Before we go through the questions that we agreed before the meeting, does anyone have any comments or thoughts or questions on what Richard's just said while it's fresh in their mind? Or Mark, that matter? Mike?
Yeah, one of the questions really is the climate change fund, 100,000 has been sitting there. Does that mean that money's going to be moved into that pot and the climate change fund no longer needs to be used or been set aside for?
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, that was a previous commitment to the climate change fund, but by previous decisions when there was a set aside. So the money's now it's been refocused. So actually, by default, then there's nothing left in there that completes or depletes that fund. So that doesn't exist anymore, and instead it moves into the corporate investment fund. Yeah.
The next question was regarding the wheelie receipts. Where does that sit in that budget line or in the part?
So that sits on the right hand side, and using a diagram still, because I think it's better than perhaps the detailed spreadsheet. So when it says usable capital receipts on that 2.153 million, that includes the receipt from Wheelie in there. So that's being brought together again into one big capital investment pot that creates that 2.595.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any questions at this stage? Okay, what we'll do, we'll move to the questions that we've already put forward prior to the meeting. The first one comes from Graham. Councillor Seddy.
So along the theme of leaving tendering in the best possible position come the day, obviously the financial situation, as Richard has explained, we seem to be in quite a strong position. So my thinking is, because I do serve with on Councillor Henderson's portfolio working party on the Levelling Up Fund, but that basically is Clacton and Harwich. So I thought that, is there any possibility of establishing a tendering investment fund for, should I say, a pan tendering initiative? And that would fit in with leaving tendering in the best possible position. And also we could either do that as an investment fund, which could last into the new unitary. And I think that would be a really strong piece of work, because we could actually call that as the Levelling Up Fund for the rurals. Say, I declare an interest because my ward is one of the rurals. And I understand that there are cost pressures, but then again, there'll always be cost pressures, won't there? And that's how we handle those cost pressures. And I always think, when you focus on problems, you'll probably get more problems. Where if we focus on solutions, that's when we come upon opportunities. So if we could set up a solution to investment in the rest of tendering, I think that would be a really strong statement going into the LGR.
Okay. You happy to respond to that?
The question was, should we set up a tendering investment fund? Okay, so the answer says no, but I'll give you a bit more of a detailed explanation to that. So literally, we've just talked about how we're moving all the pots into two pots, and you're doing exactly the opposite. You're moving money out of that pot, because that's where it is at the moment, into a holding pot for speculation. It's going to be what I'll probably put it at. And we aren't able to put pots of money in different places and hold on to them and then say to the unitary, you must hold on to them. That's the way it's got to be. The unitary will be setting out its own finances. It will set out its own ring fences and everything else that goes with that. Obviously, there'll be the statutory ring fences which they had to adhere to, but any local ring fences we put up, I'm not necessarily saying that they wouldn't, but they don't have to adhere to, because it's their own finances. We could sit there and say, do you know what, we're going to put £5 million in a fence ring pot, you can't touch it. Come 2028, they say, sorry, but we need that. So ring fencing for the future. I understand the perception, and I wasn't disappointed to see your question yet again about how we can do things like that. And I do agree with you. I mean, you can come speak to us. I've been down to Brightening Sea to use your patch to talk to you about what you might want. People are very slow coming forward about what they might see. And I think one of the biggest problems I've had as administration through the rurals is trying to get them to envisage what they might want for their own areas. They're always waiting for me to come up with it, and I don't live there, and it's really hard. So it's like me saying, do you know what, Graham, I'm going to build you a second swimming pool, and then you'd be like, why? So it's that kind of conversation that needs to be had. We're still open to conversations, but time's running away, capacity, is a massive issue for us now, because with LGR comes a lot of work. So the window's shrinking. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do anything, but I'm not going to set aside a pot for just the hope that somebody might put something in it.
Yeah.
So I've got the solution. We spend the money before LGR. And I'll tell you what, the challenge is, we'll come up, you know, if you say, yeah, we'll come up, in my ward, we will come up with schemes.
Okay, so we've got our own priorities, right? So, okay. You've just heard Richard talk about the 2-year finances. No, we've adopted that throughout the council. That's the direction we're going now. So we've aligned our priorities to the 2 years. You know, if you ask me, when would be the best time to give us a 3-year settlement? This year was it. The stability we've got now for 3 years straight into LGR is perfect for what we're trying to do. You know, so it's not about spending as much money as we can, because you've got to understand, tendering's not disappearing in it, as in the residents, all the houses are all being uprooted and put on Mars. You know, this is the council. The officers still work here, everything else. Our residents still work here. So if we spend all the money, and hand it over bankrupt almost, that's our residents we hurt. Yeah? So we have to leave it in a really good position. And you're right, you know, it's leaving tendering in the best place is the motto that we have adopted throughout. Yeah? And so we can't do, let's spend all the money. As much as I'd love to, I really would. You know, it's not something we could do.
Are you happy with that?
Well, I live in hope.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, there's a couple of sort of more technical points around that. There was the order with the section 24 from the order when that is put in place, which will be consulted on now, and will come in when the minded to decision is made, which will then actually put some limitations on what we can spend. Then going into the shadow authority, there will be limitations on further limitations in terms of that will need to go through the board. So setting aside a fund unspecified would be lost. If there were specific projects which we were doing, then that's what we need to look at. The ones which you mentioned earlier, of course, are government funded ones for specific sites. So we don't get an option of saying, I tell you what, we've had £20 million for the Clacton front. I'll tell you what, we'll take 5 million out and put it for the rest of the district. We're not allowed to do that. So there are different aspects to that, the funding, which gives us limitations, both in terms of going into LGR. And we're not allowed to what's called asset strip, i.e. use it to give it to the district, the town and parish councils. The best we can do, and we've tried to work with in terms of the town and parish councils, is what is it that we can work with around assets, as we've been discussing, and around that different ways of working. So I think we have been talking to, for instance, Waltham, Harwich, Brightlingsea town councils, to name but a few. I've been to the TDAP, the Tendering District Association of Local Councils, to give the opportunity for all of the district local councils to hear that as well. So that's a different route for that conversation as well. I'm happy to have that continue that conversation outside the meeting if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think Lisa wants to comment as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yep, Keith's nodding. Thank you, Keith. I just wanted to also say as well, following on from what Ian has just said, but I think Ian put it more politely than I'm going to. It would be unlawful for us to spend all the money before LGR happens. We are under, we're already under obligations to make sure that we do not hinder the success of the future unitary authority. MHCOJ have already issued guidance to all local authorities going through LGR to say that we cannot do this, and we need to think very carefully about our decisions. The statutory officers Ian, Richard, and I, we are under another obligation to make sure that that does not happen. So, with effect from when we get the statutory structural changes order, which will be this time next year, we'll be, as Ian has says, we'll be under even tighter controls on how we can spend money. But sorry, as the monitoring officer, I cannot have comments that are made in a public forum that we will spend the money before LGR takes into place. And I'm sorry, Graham, I know that was said in jest, but it's really, really important. We cannot do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll move to the next question, which was mine, referencing a 2-year budget plan. I have no follow up on that one. And the next one was from Peter Harris, which has been handled by Mike. Do you have any follow up on that?
I mean, yeah, obviously with the pressures of resource as we move into LGR and evolution, if and when, the cost pressures on staff, obviously regarding salaries and the outcome of increasing costs, has that impacted? This question, is it impacted on staffing levels because of the resource pressures that you're under now? So is that been added to staff levels maintained, or we're losing staff? What is this? Can someone just give me an overview of the current situation so we can actually deliver what we are supposed to be delivering right now within the costs? Just the questions, maybe someone can give us some feedback on.
I think Ian wants to respond.
I was going to say that's probably me, and the other bit of my time has been head of paid service, so probably staffing is me. So thank you, Councillor Bush. At the moment, we're not losing staff in terms of the pressures, and actually I'm going to wrap that into LGR as well as budget, but there is a risk of it. And there is a risk of it because for LGR, because of course people look and say, and may look to go elsewhere because they're concerned around the changes, which means that they are concerned around their futures, and they may want to secure their futures by going to another council which perhaps is not going through LGR or has got new opportunities which go. I'm hoping not. We're reassuring staff that actually going into LGR, there are opportunities within the new unitary authority for them to take up. It'll be a bigger authority. There may be more opportunities for promotion. There may be different opportunities in terms of the types of area they may be able to work in with larger teams, more experience. But you're right, there's a risk. In terms of the budget, that's not a risk in terms of for staffing in as much as if there's the annual pay rise, we will pay it. And we don't negotiate. That was nationally negotiated, and obviously we will pay it. The implications on our budget we see. I would widen that actually in terms of that comment to say is that there's many inflationary issues which have hit us, and in the recent years there's been things like fuel, electricity. The myriad of other building resources or staff in terms of materials, etc., have all contributed to that. The other thing is, of course, our contractors' costs have gone up, and therefore our contractors' costs have increased, which has meant that they have, where there's been their opportunity to increase the costs to us. So that those costs are ongoing, and that is a cost pressure to us. But in answer to your question, that my concern around staff is more around ensuring that they know that there's a good future with a great council, which this is, and with a good culture, making sure the culture our authority has goes into the new one in order that people want to stay with it. And then we do what Richard has done so well, and that is actually managing the finances, that we are in a sound, secure financial position, which not all councils across this country, as we well know, are in the same position. So I think that that's how we try and secure our staff's confidence, aspiration, and wanting to remain in the new unitary authority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Just to follow up exactly right regarding contractors, is a specific concern I have. is that if there's nowhere to go within their contract to inflate their contract, if we're in contract agreements that don't allow that, not saying that we are, it may affect delivering services. Waste's going to be one contract that maybe I have concerns. Will they need to actually modify a service to meet their costs? Because it's difficult enough with now the cost increase as it is. So that's a concern for me, that delivery of the service contracts could be impacted because of the cost with national employers insurance and all the other associated costs with fuel, etc.
Do you want me to pick that up, Chairman?
If you'd like. Yeah.
So I think you make a good point around contractors. So yes, there may be issues around where where they can vary the contract around levels of service. However, most contracts which we have, of course, already um, specify the service which is expected. So they can't just turn around and say we want to reduce, unless of course there's renewal, or unless of course there's a break clauses in it. So it, you're right. It's a you know yourself. It's a complex arrangements with the contractors and subcontractors, and actually some of our contractors are also being affected by their contractors, i.e., are effectively subcontractors.
Thanks for that. The next question is from myself, and that was around national insurance contributions, to which we received an answer. Um, and this question was around, did we receive as a council the full reimbursement for the additional national insurance contributions we have to pay, to which the answer is around half. But the second part of the answer says, in terms of 2026-27, this funding is now rolled into a wider revenue support grant. My question is, and the answer may well be I don't know, with that happening, as we move forward into the next 2 years, will we be able to pick out of that what funding we are getting, or will that be so um, is hidden that we won't be able to do that?
My response, you wouldn't see it. The government would say that's been rolled in at the same level as you've got in 5/6. So the government would say in their calculations, because they protected the grant settlement, they're saying you're getting the same amount of money. But for us, you lose that integrity, you lose that audit trail. So you won't see that. That's lost now going forward under the revenue support grant as it's rolled in. So yeah.
I guess that's what would happen. It would be buried in there so that you can't work out whether you're getting the same, less, or more. Which fair enough. Thanks for that. The next question is myself again, and this was around the deficit, and I'm happy with the answer to that one. So the next one is from Peter Harris with Mike here to follow up.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just thanks for the response first and foremost. But I note obviously the 500k cost pressures. It seems like we're just accepting that homelessness is continually increasing, and we're just accepting that, and rather to look at sort of controlling those costs. I know it's a difficult, complex situation, but again, all we see is just the actual calculation, and the actual homeless levels is just increasing. And I just don't know. I know the strategy. I just need to understand how we're trying to mitigate those costs rather than just accept them.
Can I refer you back to that 30th of January report? Because actually, within that, that's some of those conversations. It's a very good question, but it's just there is a lot of work going into that.
Okay.
The only thing I would say, and I know it's in the report, so I'm not giving away the report, but if I get kicked on the table, you know I've said too much about the report that's about to go. The only thing I would say about it is that this really is a very big national problem. And whilst it seems like a big problem for us, we have got neighbours near and a bit farther away, which it's a whole different ball game. It is a much bigger problem for some, and where you have areas where the cost of accommodation is higher, of course their cost of homelessness is higher, because of course they're having to pay more or they may have to be, you know, moving people elsewhere and things like that. So it's a really good question, and I will say wait till the 30th of January, but I couldn't resist but saying this is not a tendering issue. Actually, in the scale of things, we're not as bad as many, but it still is a real issue.
Just to follow up on that, it's a great question, and it's great that the scrutiny committee's picked up on it. Councillor Baker and I, as portfolio holder for housing and finance, we put together the working group in April because we recognised it was such a problem. So, you know, this is the culmination of a lot of work coming in January from that working group that met roughly every 2 to 3 weeks, pushing things through, pushing things ahead. So, you know, I'm not just passing everything to the 30th of January. We've done a lot of work on this already, so I'm quite excited to see the outcome of the report and what people think of it.
Okay, thanks for that. I think the next question again was Peter Harris with Mike. Yeah, okay. Okay, happy with that. The next question was from myself in relation to the 1.9 million identified for savings. I've got no follow-up on that one. And then the last one is around housing revenue account. Again, I've got no follow-up on that one. So is there any other questions that people would like to ask before we finish this part?
Yeah. Chairman, I think Mr. Barrett will separately introduce the HRA matter. I think to this point he's done the general fund one. Yeah. So perhaps it's just keeping your HRA question in the bag at the moment.
I've got one final question in on the budget side of things that I missed when we had the pre-meeting, but when I sat down and ran through the things for the evening, I picked up on. And that's on page 131, which is the funding of the Harwich PCSOs, a total of 50,000 over the next 2 years that's indicated. There's a couple of points. Firstly, I know I've raised this before, and I know other town and parish councils have indicated that they would like to be involved in this kind of funding. So I think the first question is, why have you decided to fund Harwich but not look at other town and parish councils that may wish to do the same thing? So what are the statistics that led you to go for this funding? And the second was, and I think if memory serves me correctly, it was in a scrutiny meeting, probably in this room, when I raised it before, and Councillor Placey, who's obviously one of the cabinet members, put forward the suggestion that other town and parish councils might like to put forward to receive funding if they could put a case. And I wondered if you'd look at that, because it does seem that other town and parish councils haven't got a look in. That's fair. I can say that because I'm not on a town and parish council myself, so I'm not banging the drum for a town and parish council in my area. Whether that would trigger anyone who now raises a question or comment who are town or parish councils, they may have to declare an interest. I don't know. That would be up to the monitoring officer.
Chairman, would you like me to pick that up for you?
Pardon?
Would you like me to pick that up for you in terms of your question about the PCSO?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So it's been going on for many years. This administration, the previous administration, all supported that. And the reason why, in part, they supported it was because it's not a sole contribution to paying for a PCSO. It was actually part of a jointly funded So if people come up with jointly funded proposals, then it's a different issue. So it's jointly funded between the PFCC, Harwich Town Council, and the District Council. It was done at a time, and to be honest, you may remember this better than I will, but it was done at a time when we had a number of initiatives which were going on, for example, in Clacton, which are our two main population centres. And it was done at a time when what we did was there was some initiatives going on which were being funded in Clacton, and we said to the PFCC at the time, actually, we need to be fair, and our other major conurbation about funding, and therefore this was struck as a multi-funded proposal. We didn't have any other multi-funded proposal in the same way, although we have done other things with other town councils in different ways, but not, as you rightly say, not specifically like that. But that's how it came about, and we now have the funding for the last 2 years, and then it will be for the new authority as to whether they take this forward and what other arrangements across the breadth of the new unitary as to what they do or don't do.
So I suppose the question is, as I say, going back to, I know Councillor Place's comment, who's a cabinet member, would it be possible for other town and parish councils if they was to do match funding bids? Because I know, for example, Frinton and Walton Town Council, they believe they fund PCSOs. I don't know about others. I think there was another one, but I can't remember which one it was.
I was at that meeting, and whilst Councillor Platey did say that, almost straight away I said, no, that's not the case. So I think she got a little bit tongue-tied, and we corrected that at the time, and we said that, you know, I believe her words were, if you want one, just ask for one. And I was like, no, 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 that's not going to be the case. And we referred to the Harwich one, and if I remember correctly, it was your administration based on crime stats. And Harwich at the time was one of those areas where crime was quite bad at the time, and the PCSO was felt that it was needed. Obviously, Harwich and the PFCC agreed with it. So I think the case would have to be made if you were going to go down that route. I'm not going to say no, it's impossible, but you know, crime in tendering, I've just had a report on it, it's down everywhere, but the lowest percentage of figures decrease was still Harwich. So I'm comfortable still help provide PCSO to Harwich, and I'd love to have one in Clacton, but as you well know, we haven't got a town council, so I've got no vested interest in it either.
That was the other part of my question, which was obviously why did you come to that conclusion? And you were saying it's still got the highest crime figures. So, but I just feel that other town and parish councils, if they could match fund, it may be something to look at. That's just my view.
Can I suggest you put in your recommendations?
Oh, I think we may have some town and parish councillors here who may consider that. I don't know. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Well, we're at the end of our questioning part. I think Richard wants to do one more part on HRA. What I'm suggesting is once we've completed this, we'll take just a 5-minute break, which will allow obviously the leader and officers to leave if they wish, or they can stay if they prefer, and then we will do our discussions and put forward recommendations. So with that, Richard, if you'd like to.
Yeah, be brief and a general for one. I think the HRA is a bit more sort of straightforward in that sense. I think there's two things, I suppose. Everything we talked about the general fund in terms of pressures applies equally to the HRA, and I think it's important about the conversation we've had a minute ago about obligations, about LGR and bits and pieces. Again, exactly the same would apply equally strongly to the HRA. Again, talking about certainty, I think the government have provided certainty again around the HRA. We had the rent setting sort of policy where the government now said to give certainty. It's a now 10-year rent setting policy, which is CPI plus 1%. Again, that's welcomed. That level of clarity and certainty going forward is very helpful. The updated business plan is on page 185, which again, same format, want to keep it consistent in terms of previous years. I think when we had a discussion around the HRA last year, there was that sort of reset around maintenance and repair costs. We had seen the impact of certain things in the economy through, salaries, NI, commodity costs, and elsewhere driving increased costs from contractors. So there was a step change last year in terms of the repairs and maintenance. From this year onwards, it's that maintaining that inflationary uplift as well, right through to the across the 30 years. It is running at a deficit, so on page 185 it does show a deficit in 5, 6 and in 6, 7. Hopefully the report is quite self-explanatory in terms of the reasoning behind that, around the fact that if we're increasing tenants' rents, it's to maintain that level of investment in their homes as well. So the business case is looking to do that, both from a revenue side, as in that ongoing day-to-day maintenance, but also on the kind of much more capital side, that replacement and refurbishment side as well. So it's maintaining that position as well. And again, I think with the certainty of the 10-year rent setting policy and the structure of the debt that was taken on back in 2012, where as loans are paid off, it provides headroom through we're not paying as much interest and we're not paying that principal. So the business plan can afford to take those sort of deficits in the short term, supported by balances. And as you see, as you go forward in the business plan, it does start to generate, based on this forecast, some surpluses. So again, don't want to manage it over very, very short time. Take a longer term position on that, and it does show it's a sustainable position. So again, it's trying to balance all those things around investment in tenants' homes. Also, in terms of iterations going forward around turning those kind of aspirations and those commitments to for housing supply as well, in terms of the investment side of the HRA and the capital programme. Again, it's trying to balance all of that, but again, leave a strong position for a successor unitary council from 2028 onwards. So there's just some sort of background in terms of context around our HRA budget setting as we are today.
Thanks for that, Richard. Mark, would you like to have anything, or are you happy with that?
Richard just covered it all, so and I know we're struggling for time, so I'll just leave it there, I think.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions, comments, observations? Okay.
Chairman, if I can just ask, in relation to page 149, you've got a RAG rating status there. You can just take the committee through that RAG rating status, red, amber and the green. So why is maintenance of stock, etc., red? And
I don't have that in front of me, but it kind of answered in the final question from Councillor Honeywood about the impact of Decent Homes 2, about the impact of the regulatory consumer standards and compliance with those as well. These are all additional pressures put on the HRA that weren't originally included as part of the 30-year business plan. So I think some of what Richard mentioned with the shortfall over the next few years is us absorbing that and then moving that forward so it becomes BAU rather than a pressure. So that's the reason for that red line sitting there. It's for us to be aware of the fact that it is having a pressure, and in that response we know that Decent Homes 2 is due to come to us, but we don't actually know what that's going to look like until we get confirmation from government as to this is what we're supposed to be doing. So there undoubtedly will be more pressures put upon the HRA because of those types of things coming forward. We've got AWEB's law, of course, which we now have to be compliant with as well. But it is being cognizant of them, and it is being aware of them, and it is kind of cutting our cloth to suit. And in answer to the question there, in collecting that data through stock condition surveys and collecting data through our tenant satisfaction surveys, those are the tools that enable us to sort of focus sharply on where we need to be spending it and having that level of investment within the HRA.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any? Mike?
dispose of 10, but we can only afford to buy 5. As that potentially, I'm only just quoting something arbitrary, because what we're finding there, so we're now reducing our stock, reducing the potential for reducing homelessness, and that's really the question I'm asking, because that's what come over in the report. It's like we've got some pretty poor properties that is beyond perhaps repair, and therefore let's dispose of them, and anybody wants to buy it will say, well, that's what we want to buy it for. I mean, and that's been cynical, but that's my question, really.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bush. And it's a really good question, because actually but quite often what it is not so much around poor condition of a building, but actually it might be a very old building. So for example, we had some really old buildings which were not actually fit for being council properties and to be maintained and to hit decent home standards too, etc., etc. So, for example, in Harwich, we had some, I mean, they were hundreds of years old. They weren't just like, 30 years old and a bit out of date. So what we're looking at doing with those ones was selling those properties. And actually, they are often quite attractive because people like older properties, but they're perhaps not necessarily easy to maintain. And then buy back properties which were formerly council stock, which have perhaps been sold in right to buy. That usually then means they're on one of our estates, which usually then means it's actually easier for maintenance because they're part of a wider area where we can get to. So it's easier to maintain. But we also know that council properties and how they were built, they're of good standard. And even if they need a bit of updating or improving to meet decent home standard too, it still means that actually the quality of the building, we know what they are. So you're right, it may be that they won't always be able to fund the same. But in terms of our receipts, actually the system so far has been working really well. I would say, so just to be absolutely clear and not mislead the committee, we had the odd one which just has been in a really poor condition, and they would have been so expensive to undertake the structural work in order to bring it back to decent home standard too. We couldn't have. It would have been not financially realistic to do it. So there's a combination of the type of property compared to what we can purchase and actually then becomes properties which are within our stock and with others. And as you'll know, if you've got a group of things together, it's much easier and actually much cheaper to maintain them, being able to then call next door and then next door, rather than I've got to go over there and then an hour later I've got to go over there. And then also if it's not of a standard which you can actually maintain without major structural work, then actually it's probably better to to sell the property and actually then just seek purchasing a former council property. And I would say that again, leaving tendering in the best possible place, as much of our stock as we can do, we will do, and that's, as you can see, that's within the budget as the HRA budget as well. It's a thing which I'm very passionate about, and I do believe in council homes. And I know other councils don't always have there, but I personally do strongly believe in councils having our homes and us operating them, and I think that's demonstrated.
Thanks for that. I think Lisa wants to come in on this as well.
All I wanted to add, in addition to what the Chief Executive has just said, is that where we as a council have decided to sell existing housing stock for the reasons that Mr. Davidson has just articulated, we always do a report setting out why that individual property is being put up for sale, and also that it goes to the open market to make sure that the council gets the best price it possibly can. So I just wanted to give that reassurance to the committee as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, anyone else have any questions? Okay, that comes to the end of the sections on that, but before we let the leader and officers go, firstly I'd like to thank the leader for his email exchange with me. I know he did say at the meeting he would respond in writing, but he was kind enough to respond to a second question as well. So they're recorded as questions, but the first one really isn't a question. It was just more of a statement by myself. I don't know if you want to comment on that first one or.
Yeah, I think you've submitted this into the public domain. So, I mean, the response is on the this that you've submitted. So, I'm happy to read those out.
It's fallen off my copy.
It's fallen off your copy. I'm happy to read it out if you want. So this is our exchange. So is that what you're after? Yeah. So
Questions we submitted and responses that you supplied. Last page.
the last page I've got is how's the housing revenue account being used to ensure housing stock? Is that the one?
No.
That's the last question I have. Ah, okay. I haven't
The
seen
back after that.
I haven't seen these, Chairman, so bear with me a second while I read them.
Would you like me to read it? Would that help? Or have you got it?
I've got a copy now, so you can read it for the tape if you want.
Don't mind. Okay, as I say, it was more of a statement, the first one. It says, you say you did not recognise the date of 8th of February 2024 and its relevance. This was the date quoted at a briefing for councillors on the issue of spendles and referred to the report referred to in the report outcome from the Spendles House Capital Scheme Review, as when issues started to come to light. Having directed you to this date, I'm surprised you did not yourself seek assistance from the Chief Executive as to why it was that the Cabinet members did not know anything about the issue until early March.
Trying to think, you've taken me back to February 2024, which is nearly a year ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, so I think I have a good working relationship with the chief exec, and I don't get told everything that goes on the council. The chief exec can't tell me absolutely everything that goes on because some things are privy to the running of the council that I shouldn't know. For instance, staff matters, things like that. I think in this occasion, it was just early doors. I was waiting for him to find the facts and the conclusions. And then I'm guessing, this is all pure speculation because you're trying to get me to remind 2 years ago, that he would tell me once he had the information together to form a proper response to any particular problem, which is kind of the way we worked the whole way through. You know, you don't know what you don't know on the first day. So if it takes 3 weeks for the chief exec to get some proper answers and everything else for me, that's fine. I did say to you, you go and ask him if you want, but I'm quite happy in our relationship that he will bring things, and he has done many, many times, to me as and when I need to know them. And that's why I hadn't bothered to chase him.
Okay, that's fine, no problem. And the second one, as I say, was a question. It says, in response to your state of tendering address to full council on 19th of March 2024, I asked, quote, Spendles, we now hear it's overdue, but we don't know if it's over budget. Can you let us know, end quote. This was over 2 weeks after the portfolio holder had been advised of issues with the project. You told full council in response to my question that about Spendle's budget that, quote, it's going on fine, unquote. It wasn't, was it?
Hindsight's a great thing. I think my answer to you in this email exchange was it was a concept thing. So when I stood up, and I always do this at full council, I try to answer all the questions presented to me. I'll try to be open and transparent. And at that point, it was a concept thing, and I thought everything was fine, and it wasn't an issue. Now, I don't know when it became this thing that you keep doing. I think this has been like the third or fourth time I've answered this question. I don't know what you're looking for. I have answered it. The answer's in front of you. It's in the public domain. I've got nothing more to say on it.
So the final question on this, and I think we're as far as we're going to get. Do you think on the 19th of March 2024, you misled council.
Absolutely not.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Joe.
On the subject of spendals, and we've got the portfolio holder here, would he be able to provide the committee with a complete overview regarding the present situation in respect of spendals? Because there's talk about the past, but it might be nice to have.
Thank you, Councillor
How
Henderson.
things are
And
going.
you're right, we'll end on a good note. Last time I looked at this, we've had about 130 families through since its opening in December 2025. It's one of the things that we keep an eye on, especially Councillor Baker and myself, because we want to see how well and successful it is. Of those 130 families, the average stay in the place is about 66 days, which is well beneath it. And what we need to understand is that we haven't got a single family in anywhere but this council accommodation. So we've got no one in bed and breakfast. So we've got some really good places for the children and the families to be. You know, we've got staff there. We're a wraparound service to try and help them move on to their own private rentals and to get the kids to school, make sure that work and opportunities are there. And then there's an upside for the council, which basically it's a ballpark figure because we haven't got to the end of the financial year, but it's saving around £300,000 to £350,000 a year. You know, so for the council, it's definitely hitting us with the savings as well. So it's a success story and one we can all put our hats on. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming along this evening, all of you. You are welcome to stay if you like, although I think I might know the answer. We'll take just a 5-minute break to allow you to collect your things up if you are leaving, and then we'll do our deliberations and come up with recommendations. So thanks again and safe journey home.
live stream back on.
Yep. Following our questions, and the first part is around housing. And we had a brief discussion in the break um, around what we should do with that, and we've come up with an outline which I'll ask Keith to read out, and then if you want to comment, tweak it, or make changes, then please speak, and we'll know where we are. So Keith, could you?
Yes.
Do let us know where we are on that one?
Chairman, I think just echoing the points that you said to those attendees whilst they were present, is to thank them for that, and the committee can just record that, I think, as its thanks. It has, through its task and finish group on the housing strategy, received a report with 6 recommendations in there. I'm not going to read all 6 recommendations, but recommendation 5, rather than the words that are set out there, is in place of that to say ensures that the Cabinet sets out how the ambitions within the housing strategy 2026 to 30, along with the key statistics around, or the key issues of homelessness, temporary accommodation, and the council's own housing stock, are monitored, and the ability of the housing service to cope with demand. So it's asking the Cabinet to set out how it is going to monitor all of those. There's an additional one, so other than the 6 set out in the task and finish group report, a 7th one, the Cabinet be requested to consult on its draft homelessness policy proposed to be considered at its meeting on the 30th of January. Perhaps should emphasise, Chairman, that was to consult with this committee rather than anyone else.
Are we all happy with that? Okay, can I have a proposer for that?
I think we've got Matthew
and
then Mike.
And Mike. So they've proposed it and seconded it. Can we adopt that? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for that. Now the next part is the financial side. We need to do a response to that.
Chairman, item 7 was just the half-year point, and I think it was your intention that from the committee, that to just receive that information as it was helping you support your budget scrutiny item 8 on the agenda. So if it was just receive, if that's...
Are you happy to receive that? The proposer and seconder? Okay, Sarah and Matthew. We're all happy? Yep. Excellent. Okay, that's that bit done. And now that moves to the next bit, which is the budget proposals, which we're suggesting that we just, what was the wording you came up with?
I think it was receive again, Chairman.
Just receive, yes. Okay then. Okay, are we happy to receive that?
Chairman, just on the housing revenue account, I think that the conversations during that was that the housing revenue account budgets, you were given reassurance that it met the obligations of the council as landlord and had taken into account the views of tenants through the processes that are established for that. If you're happy with that, we can say that we receive it on that basis.
Are we happy with that? Okay then, I need a proposer, Mike and Sarah again. Thank you. That's great. All in favour? Okay, all right. That's it. So I think we're at the end of the agenda now. I will double check there's nothing over the page, but I don't believe there is. No, we've just got date and time of next meeting, which is Tuesday the 3rd of February. So thanks for coming along. We've certainly made progress quicker than the last time we met. So thanks very much for coming, and safe journey home.
See you, Lisa.